Hi, and thanks for clicking on my video. My name is Avery. I'm a realtor with Coldwell Banker in the Cottonwood office. And I think the reason you clicked on this video is because you're kind of on that hamster wheel, that treadmill of rent, where you just keep going from rental to rental, never saving up enough money to buy a house, never being able to get out of that cycle, and realizing that you have a problem. And now that you realize you have a problem, you're like, oh, I see this video. Maybe this gentleman can help me. Well, I can help you. But first, let me tell you the problem you think you have is actually worse than you even think. Let me explain why. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're paying $1,600 a month rent and you're living in a three-bedroom apartment and you're doing the best you can, but that's where you are, right? Every year for the rest of your life, that rent is going to go up somewhere in the neighborhood of 4%. Maybe sometimes a little less, maybe sometimes a little bit more. The only way it's not going to go up is if you're living in your parents' basement. And most people are not going to do that for the whole life. So your rent is going to go up. Now let me tell you what that'll do to you. So that 1,600 will go up 4% a year, and in about 5 years, your rent is going to be well over $2,000. Now, here's the problem. In the end of 30 years, your rent is going to be like $4,000. And to give you an idea how bad that problem really was, if you add it up just from today, 1,600 a month, and add in all the increases all the way up to 4,000, and you can check my math, you will have paid over $1 million in rent to an ungrateful landlord who doesn't fix things, leaves you hanging, and doesn't even answer your calls, but shows up every month for the rent. So, or even worse, charges you huge late charges if you don't pay. So, on this one hand, that 1,600 a month rent sounds bad enough. But guess what? 30 years from now, it's going to be $4,000, and you will have already spent 1 million in rent. Now, what's the option? What's the alternative? Okay, so $1,600 a month rent. Let's say you bought a house, average house somewhere around here, fairly new, small house. I guess what you typically hear them calling a starter home. So the average between Albuquerque, Rio Rancho, Los Lunas, average starter home is right around 300,000. Take a $300,000 house, guys. At the end of 30 years, if the inflation rate that's raising your rent increases the prices of the houses at the same rate, that $300,000 house will be at minimum 700,000. And you know what else will have happened in 30 years? You will have paid off your mortgage. And you know what that means? That means for the rest of your life, you don't have to pay a penny in rent or mortgage. You only have to pay real estate taxes, which are nothing compared to the amount you would have to pay for rent. I mean, if the real estate taxes now are like a couple of 200, 300, and they went up even 100% to 500, 600, comparing that to $4,000 rent, I mean, obviously you can see a huge difference. Now, what else? You're going to be living with rent-free, mortgage-free. You're going to have a home that's worth at least 700,000. I mean, can I legally guarantee 700,000? No, but I can tell you in my entire life, I've just watched most real estate markets going up at that average pace of 4% a year. And on average, at the end of 30 years, that's about even a conservative amount what this house is going to be worth. And you will have no debt against it. So literally, you could sell that house, and if it's your primary residence, you will likely not have to pay taxes. Although I'm not a tax advisor, most people know that, and you could definitely consult your CPA and double check, or just call H&R Block, and they'll tell you if you're selling your primary residence, you're not going to pay taxes, right? So, long story short, guys, you will be worth $700,000. Or you can just stay in the house and not have to pay a penny for your living quarters, right? Compared to paying $4,000 a month after having spent $1 million of your own money. So my question is, do you see why your problem is even worse than what you thought it was? And if you see that, pay close attention, because I'm going to solve your problem literally in the next couple of minutes. So what are we talking about here, right? You're renting, right? You got approved for a rent. You probably have a job. Your issue is most likely either a credit issue, a debt issue, or a down payment issue, right? And I can solve all three of those problems, right? Let's take them one at a time, right? So if you want to buy a house, typically to get a mortgage, you need a high enough credit score for the mortgage company to say, yes, we'll lend you the money for that house. Now, there are three different programs, one for veterans, one is a New Mexico program, and one is a United States government program. Those other two are not for veterans, they're just for average homeowners, right? And basically, what they will do is they will lend you a 100% amount of the entire price of the house, provided you meet certain criteria, right? So the first criteria is your credit score. And it's a hard one and an easy one. Why? Because if they're going to lend you a whole 100%, your credit has to be a little bit higher than what they would have offered you if your credit was a little lower and you were only borrowing like 96.5%, which is kind of like the average that most people do, right? So you want to borrow 100%, you need a pretty decent credit score. You may already have a great credit score and you already passed that test with flying colors. But let's say you don't, okay? I can sit you down with somebody who will show you exactly what you need to do to get your credit from where it is to over the threshold where they'll approve you. Sometimes it takes a couple of weeks, sometimes it takes a couple of months. But guys, here's the best thing. You tell me, if we focus on this like a laser beam for 2, 3 months, even if you have a credit problem, and that credit problem gets fixed and you get that house, well, what's going to happen in the next 30 years? You're going to be in that second scenario where you own that home and you're now living mortgage and rent free, as opposed to the other you who didn't fix your credit, who didn't get the mortgage, who didn't get the house, and is now paying over $1 million in rent and has absolutely no equity and is keep paying 4,000, 4,200, 4,500 every year. By the time you've lived in that house 40 years, or any house that you are renting, I can't even calculate it. The sums get ridiculous. So you want to get off that treadmill. The credit is usually most people's problem. And I can tell you, I've got people I'm talking to right now that I'm solving that problem for them. I've got people who I've already had fix their problem and already have their house. Simple as that. Let's go to the next one. Your job, okay? So you need to make a certain amount of income. You need to have been at the job for a certain amount of time. Well, if you don't make enough income, you can either get a raise, get a promotion, change jobs, get a second job, but then you'll have to stay there long enough for them to calculate the income, including that second job, right? Or you can include your spouse or another member of your family in the mortgage so that their income plus your income gets your income total for the household over the threshold. You now pass number two. Now, let's say you don't have a spouse. Let's say you don't even have a brother or a sister who's making enough money to do this with, right? You could have a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle. They could co-sign, right? Or they could even possibly go in on the house with you. There are a lot of different ways, right? Now, the idea is you want to go down the whole list and explore all the possibilities and figure out which way is the easiest way to meet that income threshold. Many of you meet it already and you just don't know it. But others don't meet it and need to sit down and figure out, well, okay, what's the plan? How are we going to do this, right? So you have credit, you have income. The third one is debt. Now, the story on debt is very simple. I'll give it to you with an example, right? The mortgage company who's going to lend you the money to buy this house is going to say, hey, how much do you need? You're going to say, I want to borrow the whole 100%. I want to use that program. Now, The more money you borrow as a percentage of the price of the house, the higher the restrictions are on the loan. So they're going to say, wait, we need to check those debt ratios. How much do you already owe? Do you own a car and do you have payments on the car? Do you have a fifth wheel and do you have payments on that? Do you have a motorcycle, right? And they're going to go right down the list and look at everything that you bought on credit. And what are they going to say? Holy cow, this person or this couple or this family, they've got so many toys, they're like an amusement park. But their debt is so high as a ratio or a percentage compared to how much they make. It's too high. We can't lend them that money. Now, guys, I'm not going to lie to you. Why would they? Right? That makes you a lesser credit risk. But it's really simple. You take that motorcycle and you go sell it. You take that second car and you go sell it. You take that fifth wheel and you go sell it. Not all three of them. I mean, you need something for transportation. But my point is, you sell what you don't need. Now your debt ratio goes drastically lower. You get approved for the mortgage. End of story. You may say, well, I sold the fifth wheel. I'm never going to buy it back. Or I sold the motorcycle. Yeah, it was just a phase I'm going through. I'm not even going to buy another one. Or in a year, you might say, hey, I'm going to buy the same exact one. That's your call. The main thing is the third piece of the puzzle, which is the debt ratio. In many cases, you'll already pass. But if you don't pass, there are things you can do. Okay? So we can talk about that, and you can sit down with the mortgage broker, and they'll give you the best case scenario as far as what kind of move you should make to meet the criteria of the lender. Okay? So let's say we get you approved for a 100% or what they call a zero down loan. By the way, some of those loans will even include a grant, which if you qualify for that grant, they're going to give you $10,000 for the down payment, and you don't have to pay that $10,000 back. So that's like a bonus. We can talk about that more when you come into the office. But for now, let me just say that that's on top of the zero down. You could even get a grant. Now, let's go talk about the house for a second, right? So you may have heard there's something called closing costs, right? When you go and you do your closing, you sit at a table and you always hear people saying, oh, I had to write this check. And yeah, in most cases it's true, but in not all cases. And I can tell you, all over Los Lunas, all over Rio Rancho, all over Albuquerque, there are plenty of sellers and plenty of builders in particular who are building brand new houses that will happily pay your closing costs when you buy a house from them. The only difference is you don't know who they are, and I do, because I do this all day long. Now, next thing is, where are you going to find all these houses? So number one, obviously, as a licensed realtor, I have a list of every house that's for sale, whether they're resales or whether they're construction, right? And the ones that are in construction that are not completely done yet, you can actually go buy that house with a zero down mortgage, get zero closing costs from the seller, move into that house in 90 days, 120 days, kiss your landlord goodbye, although I wouldn't even kiss him, kind of like slap him goodbye, right? And you're in a new house. It's that fast. And I've done it so many times that, I'm quite confident that in most cases, if you're listening to this video, I can do it for you. So, once again, my name is Avery. I'm a licensed realtor in the Cottonwood office of Coldwell Banker. We are the largest realtor in New Mexico. We have approximately 500 realtors in this company, and I'm in the top 15% of those 500. And the reason I am is because I've got the connections with the builders. I've got the connections with the mortgage people. I've got the connections with the credit people, and I know what I'm doing. And so when you sit down with me, I can map out a plan, and in no time, I'll say, hey, let's go look at this, and this. And literally in 90 days, you can be in a house. So here's my suggestion, guys. Thanks very much for listening. There's a link down below to set up a free consultation. Come into the office, We'll sit down, have a soda, have a bottle of water, whatever your poison is. We'll talk for a half an hour about your personal situation, another 15 minutes about all the different houses. I'll show you pictures on the computer, etc., etc. And then we'll take the last 15 minutes and we'll make an exact plan of how we're going to get this done. If you need to talk to the mortgage broker, I'll get them on the phone. If you need to talk to the credit people, I'll get them on the phone. If it takes a little longer than 90 days because you weren't ready, so what? We're talking 30 years, guys, right? You can, in the next 3 to 6 months, solve the problem that will haunt you for the next 30 years. And I can help you, and I'm willing to help you. Click the link below, set up a consultation, and we'll talk. Okay, thanks again for looking at the video, guys, and I'll hopefully meet you soon.